The ancient Egyptian empire, as recorded in history books, had a unique feature within its internal structure. The pharaoh, the absolute ruler, owned the entire population of the empire, making his subjects his slaves. This massive harem was a powerful tool. The pharaoh, with his vast empire, could afford an immense harem. The history and significance of the harem in Egypt is fascinating. Pharaohs were considered mediators of the gods, and everything related to their lives was seen as sacred by the people. In the ancient states, male sexuality was defined by the priestly class as an instrument to maintain power over the world. A prime example is seen in the harem of Pharaoh Ramesses II, who had around 100 concubines and wives, adding new women each year, eventually reaching a total of 1,000. This practice, similar to that of the Chinese emperors, viewed female sexual energy as a battery or source of power for male rulers. The more sexual partners a ruler had, the more powerful his sacred accumulator became. Now we understand the crucial role the female harem played at the court of the ruler. The history of the harems along the Nile Valley dates back to ancient times, even before a unified country existed. It was during the time when Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt were separate kingdoms, only uniting in the millennium before our era. It would take even more time before these two regions merged into a single empire ruled by the mighty pharaohs. In each of these kingdoms, the harem existed, and the ruler would take as wives the daughters of subordinate princes, as well as concubines, wives, sisters, and daughters of tribal chieftains who refused to swear allegiance. This method of maintaining power over a complex administrative region was effective. Essentially, some of the women were initially hostages allowed to call the ruler brother rather than husband, making them his relatives. Among the Egyptians, a brother and sister could marry, strengthening the legitimacy of the rulers of both Egypts. This gave rise to the legend of taming female energy and the need to replenish the creative accumulator. The ruler's harem played a vital role in stabilizing the world order. Herodotus, the father of history, described a festival dedicated to the cat goddess, which took place in the city of Bubastis, the main center of worship for this feline deity. During this festival, Egyptian men and women would travel together by boat, with both sexes present on each vessel. Some women had instruments to make noise, while some men played musical instruments along the way, with the rest singing and clapping upon arrival in Bubastis. They celebrated with various sacrifices, and a significant amount of alcohol was consumed during this festival, more than the entire rest of the year. Life and struggles within the harem were intense. Unlike the despotism of the East, women in North African despotism had more rights. They were the chargers of the men, and their energy transformed from that of the lioness Sekhmet to that of the cat Bastet, and then to the loving Hathor. In the women's quarters, the pharaoh's senior wife lived with him. The junior queens resided in the palace complex, followed by the other wives, and then the concubines, who were very beautiful young girls. These concubines were recognized as the direct servants of Hathor, continuously reviving the life force and sexual energy of their master through various sexual acts and rituals, which we will explore later. Dressed in the most exquisite linen garments, they adorned themselves with intricate, net-like dresses and a belt around their hips. The life of the harem was not without its challenges. The great Pharaoh Ramesses II had 111 sons and 67 daughters, all from his wives and concubines. His descendants formed the ruling clan, but each had to be recognized first. The beauties of the harem during the empire's heyday came from all known regions of Egypt. The cultural program for these concubines included singing, playing string instruments, dancing, and even playing a game similar to chess with the pharaoh. The senior wife of the ruler, the chief wife of the leader of the Egyptian empire, and the owner of everything and everyone, had as much power as the pharaoh himself. This lady could make important state decisions. However, not everyone was pleased with this arrangement, leading to bloody intrigues within the harem. The participants in these intrigues were the supreme favorites, the supreme eunuch, and the priest, always fighting for the right to influence the pharaoh for their benefit. But the competition within the group of the ruler's wives, even the junior ones, should not be overlooked. If even one of them stood out as a favorite in the eyes of the master, the struggle began, and all means were fair: poison, knives, slander, accusations of treason and sin, and sexual rituals and ceremonies within the harem. Of course, the main duty of the women was to participate in these rituals and ceremonies to replenish the potency of the pharaoh, as his strength was considered the strength of the life-giving force and consequently the strength of the entire United Kingdom. Speaking of the cultural practices within the palace, the sexual rituals began with the fact that everyone could walk around completely naked, except for the representative of the gods, who had to wear at least the royal regalia, a headdress with a diadem. The ladies did not shy away from being naked in public, and this was considered natural, as evidenced by the wall paintings of ancient Egyptian structures. Natural love impulses were present, and it is important to note that the personal life of the pharaoh was not a secret. Any activity of the pharaoh was part of the religion of his subjects, who were also his slaves, so over time some of his personal life, including his intimate life, turned into public rituals. Even sexual acts, which according to legend were supposed to ensure the fertility and prosperity of the country, became public. It is essential to remember that in very ancient times, sex symbolized the sowing of crops in all agricultural societies, and the Nile Delta society was precisely agrarian. For example, naked courtiers of any gender and age could closely observe the naked pharaoh with women, engaging in intimate hairstyles, gentle petting, and striptease dances, which were ancient Egyptian innovations. Circumcision, also depicted in the country's buildings, was likely another such innovation. Only sexual acts aimed at conception were accompanied by a strict ceremony. First, suitable days were calculated according to the calendar, and the days of the Nile's flood were never chosen. After a session of poisoning the body with alcohol, that is, during and after the holidays, the main goal of all rituals and ceremonies was to maintain the ruler's erection. All the women present during the process, not just the ones symbolizing the womb of the earth with whom the pharaoh had sexual intercourse, were involved in this. This is evidenced by statuettes, bas-reliefs, and other depictions. In every part of the state, the pharaoh could perform the ritual anywhere. Despite the fact that procreative sex was a part of leisure, there was a strict algorithm for the process of conception. The significance of the sexual act within the harem was more important than just the act itself. The participation of at least one of the pharaoh's sisters, incest, was considered sacred in the Black Land, and oral caresses, according to myths, were how Isis brought Osiris back to life. It is understood that assistants were required to support the back or buttocks during coitus, and this group tradition likely originated from the pre-pharaonic period. In the frescoes, sexual acts are presented as a composition not only of spouses but also of other inhabitants of the hut. At the end of the Harem era, instead of the conclusion of Egypt, we received a tendency towards its disappearance. The investigation revealed that someone from the harem who had become a hotbed of political intrigues was the killer. They disappeared simultaneously with the religion that deified monogamy. Cleopatra tried to return, but the harem was no more.